I'd like to introduce New Brunswick author S.C. Eston as he talks about one of his latest books, Deficiency. Deficiency was published in 2012, and we've got the book here. It's a fast-paced science fiction thriller, and it delivers a chilling warning about misunderstood technologies and the greed of unchecked corporations. He grew up as a French Acadian in the Peninsula Acadienne, but writes in English. He has worked in the IT field for over 25 years and has completed his MBA in 2017. And he lives in Fredericton with his wife and child. Steve also has two other published books, The Conclave, published in 2018, The Burden of the Protector in 2016, and is featured in Autumn Path Anthology. Published in 2021. These books are available through the New Brunswick Public Library System and are available for purchase at Westminster Books, several of the Chapters Indigo bookstores in New Brunswick, or you may also purchase copies online. We'll also have Steve's email at the end of this presentation so that if you want a signed copy, you can get one. I'm now going to turn this over to Steve. Thank you, Steve.
All right, thank you for the introduction. So the program for today that I had in mind was, I'll just give it a little bit of an introduction, then I'll talk about the inspiration behind the book. Then I'll talk a little bit about writing the book. Then I'll do some readings. And then we'll have a period of questions or discussion at the end. But at any point in time, if you have a question, just raise your hand and then it's not a problem. So yeah, so thank you for coming. Like I was saying, you know, I write under the name S.C. Eston. My name is Steve Chassin. When I was growing up, I read a lot of books in English, and especially in the fantasy and science fiction field, most of the books are in English. So that's how I ended up writing in English. Seems to me it was easier. There's a bigger market, and you know, Stephen King always says, you know, one of the best things you can do as a writer is read a lot. So everything I read basically was in English. So that's how I ended up writing in English. On the other hand, my wife is unilingual English. I pretty much live in English now, but I did try my hand at writing about 20 years ago, and then I kind of got scared by the whole writing industry. I didn't know what I was doing, so I kind of stepped away from it, and I got a few rejection. And then back in 2015 is when I kind of started writing more seriously again, and that's mostly due to my wife, who kept pushing me, and she said, no, she said, you should write, you should write. And that support system has always been, is always important for a writer. And I didn't have that before. Growing up, you know, I was in a mindset that being an author is not a real job, which it's hard making a life out of it. And that's not what I'm doing. I'm writing part-time, but still, I was kind of told that, you know, it was not a good place to put your time, which was too bad, because it's really something that I enjoy now. So I've been very grateful for my wife, who kind of pushed me into it. So Deficiency is my third publication. It's my first full-length novel. It's my first science fiction long story, I would say. I wrote, I think, one short story before that, so that was a little bit new for me. The reception for the book has been actually very, very positive, so that's always it's always good. So the inspiration or where the idea came from for Deficiency, that's always a question that I find that's hard to answer, because it's very rare for me that it's one thing that, you know, leads me to writing a book. In this case, I would say that, you know, my love for science and science fiction kind of pulled me organically towards writing science fiction, I guess. You know, I wanted to when I was reading some of my favorite authors, you know, Kim Stanley Robinson, Arthur C. Clarke, watching some movies I like, Matrix, Cloud Atlas, or playing video games. Mass Effect is one. I'm a big fan of the Mass Effect trilogy. I just came to really, really enjoy science fiction. Growing up, I read almost solely fantasy for like probably 10, 15 years. So I've been branching out since then. Now I read pretty much everything. So the book here has many elements of science fiction that comes from a wide area of sources that I've read and that I have interacted with. So it's kind of a tribute, I guess, in a way, to science fiction in general. The other thing that led me to kind of write, well, first of all, I wrote the book and it was like 5,000 words. I was trying to write it for competition, and then it ended up being over 100,000 words. So obviously the short story format did not work. But with each iteration, I would add pieces to it. And one of the things I talk about in this one is corporations, businesses. And I completed my MBA in 2017. It was online, so did that over the course of 3 or 4 years. And that kind of scared me quite a bit doing the MBA. There's 2 reasons why I was doing it. I was doing it because in my career, I was just going towards management position and director's position. So I really wanted to learn about the management of people and that kind of stuff. The other aspect is the businesses. And the way that our world is organized, or corporations are organized or are created, it's very scary. I mean, even if you're well-intentioned, if you want your business to be successful, there's certain rules you have to abide by, and that automatically puts money and profits ahead of anything else. So that's one of the things I wanted to touch base on this. There's some areas in our world that are very scary, and it's way worse than we think. But I wanted to go one step further than that and kind of create an environment where, okay, we have a government, but what if the corporations were really in power here, which some places around the world is probably already there, but I don't know. I just wanted to push it a little bit more. So that's where the corporation kind of came in. The other thing I wanted to put in there is that I thought I'll give this a try. In fantasy, I create basically everything from scratch, but here I thought, let's use a little bit of my own experience and see what I can do with that. So like Kate was saying at the beginning, I have 25 years experience in the IT world. I was a web developer for many years, team leader for many years. I had some great teams working for me. So the main character in the book, Artens, is a project leader, and his whole team, he has a great team around him. And that was kind of my way to kind of pay homage, I guess, to my old team during the days that I really enjoy. So it comes from there. But the whole piece in the story about, him being a team lead, the friction he has with his manager, the demands and the deadline, all that kind of stuff. I have a lot of experience with that. And the deployment, there's the main character is working on a technological solution. So I have a lot of experience with that. So I thought I'll do that for once. I'll try to use something I know, instead of just inventing. And then the last thing is, I guess I wanted to talk about technologies. The one thing about technology that really, I don't want to say I'm scared easily, but that scares me as well, technologies, because I just find that, especially nowadays, we move so fast with new technologies and we don't really test them properly, and we don't look at what the long-term impacts can be, and I just know that, in my work environment, for example, we're very excited about implementing new technologies, and oftentimes we implement those technologies and it's actually slowing down business instead of increasing efficiency, because it just adds more tools. People are not used with these tools. Some of the new tools that we have so many options that people end up just wasting more time. So I guess that's one example where, it's not too critical that we don't test the technology, but, if you want to be efficient, you should probably test technology before you implement it in your organization. But it seems to be the other way around. We just seems to jump on technology. And obviously you have the social media piece that I find as it completely changed how society works and our relationship works. And I think that a lot of what the impacts of that on our life and our relationship, there's a lot of that we still haven't seen yet. So I wanted to take in this story, I kind of took kind of Facebook and a social media platform, and I kind of pushed that a little bit further. And I just said, okay, well, instead of having, a Facebook page, you'll have a profile room, which is 3D. You go in there, it's kind of a 3D environment. You can invite people in your room. You have a friend panel, which is kind of your friend list. So it's kind of a step further. And what I did as well is I said, okay, well, I can, this is an idea that came from, obviously, I'm not inventing anything, but I just said, okay, what if the device that we use was just, implanted in the neck, and then it's very easy to use. You don't have to do anything. You just have access to that sphere. It's called the biosphere in my story, that social media platform. You always have it. You only have to actually want to use it, and it just becomes in front of your eyes. So it's that idea that people always want the easiest solution, and they get excited about that, right? But in the story, what we quickly find out is, because you have that device in your neck, you have no privacy anymore. There's no way to kind of hide, which in most cases is probably good. It can be good. But the cases like in the story, when the two main characters, Arten and Kennedy, find themselves running from the corporation, having the chip in their neck and not being able to remove it, kind of puts them a very, very challenging place. So I wanted to kind of explore that as well. The last thing that I wanted to do in this story as well, that this is something actually I haven't done, but maybe I haven't read enough books. I haven't seen it, but like I said, maybe it's probably there in some books, but I haven't read it myself, is I wanted a mature couple. I was just thinking about the relationship I have with my wife, and, I've been very blessed and very lucky to just be happy, with the partner I have, and not have that worry, that, oh yeah, am I going to end up alone, or am I going to, end up, do I need, do I have the right partner kind of thing? That's all settled for me. And I wanted kind of a couple like that in my story. So the two main characters, Artens and Kaidi, their relationship is very mature. They're together. There's no doubt that they're going to stay together. That said, they're facing very challenging, a very challenging situation where, Kaidi is having a baby, and she's trying to have it naturally, which is not what the society asks of them. Babies at that point are grown in laboratories, so they're kind of going outside of the law. And then Arten's sister and Kaidi's best friend, Detel, goes missing, and that kind of puts them in the eye of the corporation, and that's where they kind of starting having hard time to run away or to hide. Let's put it that way. So that's the inspiration. That's a bit where it came from. So I do a lot of iterations when I write. So with every iterations, usually I add layers. So some of these, I guess, source of inspiration were added at a later time, or later revisions. But that's a little bit where the idea came from. So writing the story. So yeah, I started the story in 2010, and then it was published in 2020. So 10 years overall, but I write on a lot of different projects. So I was on and off on this story. I did complete 17 revisions. So I do a lot of revisions. Some of the revisions are fairly quick. Others are very, very extensive. Really depends. I send my story. I have my best friend there is my, what I call my alpha reader. So I send him the story. Sometimes I can send him a story 3 or 4 times. The poor guy reads it from beginning to end every time and send me his feedback. And then I go in and I kind of fix things. Then I have the beta readers, I have the editors. So every time the story comes back, I kind of go through it. But I do most of the work even before I share it. For this story, I needed an extremely detailed timeline, which is not I always have a timeline, but in this case, it was to the minute, like because the story, all the action happens in one day, and I just needed to know at every minute of the day what was happening. So I had a very, very long timeline of everything happening throughout the story. Some of the timeline obviously has the content that's in the story, but it has a lot more than that, things happening in the background, that kind of stuff. I also kind of invented some kind of a few words. I wouldn't say I invented kind of a vocabulary for the book. Nothing too complicated, but I kind of wanted to give it a feel a little bit different. So there's a lot of word that I put together. I use existing words and just put them together to kind of have a new meaning. So there's no, I try not to kind of create new words. Like I just reuse some of the words and connected them together and kind of change the meaning a little bit, but it should be fairly easy to understand. One of the things I wanted to do too with the story initially was I wanted all the numbers to be digit, not letters, not written. And I thought that would give him something cool, and then I read it and I was like, no, that's kind of too much actually. So I changed that, and every number is under 10 is written letters, but the rest is digits. Kind of went between. The writing for this one, the writing style was different as well from what I'm used to because it's a science fiction thriller. So the action happened a little bit more faster. So I use shorter sentences, a little bit more of a simpler vocabulary, that kind of stuff, just to give the story kind of a different feel. I did kind of play with the verb tense as well, which is always tricky. So I use the present tense when is the point of view of a computer, an artificial intelligence, a cyborg, because I just wanted to give it a different feel, because these machine or the computer or a robot will think way faster than we do. So I just wanted to give it kind of a feel of more in the moment. So as when you get to a chapter that's from one of the view, the verb tense kind of changes. Some readers will probably find that annoying. I kind of like it, but I thought it's something I would do just to kind of try to kind of shift, I guess, the feel of the story a bit from those points of view. One of the big part of writing the story was actually the Adjustment Bureau movie soundtrack, which was the soundtrack I've listened to when I was writing this. I must have listened to the soundtrack over hundreds of times because it's not a very long soundtrack. But I never got tired of it. And every time I would turn it on, one note, and I'd be writing the story. And I know that's probably never going to happen to me again. So I really enjoyed it while it lasted, because it was a story that was extremely easy to write. It's, I think the story is fairly complex. There's a lot happening. It's a pretty complex world. But for some reason, as soon as I put that soundtrack on, the whole world became very clear. The story was clear. So yeah, I kind of enjoyed that, because the story I just finished, which will hopefully come out later next year, that one was the opposite. I had no end of struggles with that other story. So, but not the case with Deficiency. Deficiency was a lot of fun and quite easy to write. So any questions about all of that? And we can go to the next slide, but that's the reading before we go into readings. So for the readings, I've selected 3 sections. It was kind of challenging to find the readings. This is my first time that I read. Actually, it's the first time I read from this book, and it's over 400 pages, which is kind of different, because what I wrote before with novellas, and I was like, okay, I only have a certain amount of pages to choose from, but here it's like there's so many things I could have read. But yeah, so I'm going to read the introduction, and then I'm going to read 2 other parts in the book. So the first one is called Induction. So that's the prologue, and it doesn't connect directly with the events of the story, but it kind of puts, I think, the reader in the right mindset when reading the book. It just gives, I don't know when that scene came from. I don't know when I wrote it. And but I just wrote this very short scene Then I tacked it on the beginning. I was like, and then I couldn't kind of get rid of it. I was like, I don't know if it fits, but I can't get rid of it. I think it gives a good introduction to kind of this world that the story is set in. So yes, I'm going to read that induction. White walls and a white ceiling, blinding white lights and a strong smell of disinfectants. In the center of a silver table rested 3 small bundles. What's wrong with it? The inspector asked, pointing at the second bundle. The eyes, they don't focus. One goes to the left and the other. I see the obvious, I asked. What's wrong with it? The 3 bird engineers exchanged a brief look. One nodded and one looked away. The third swallowed and answered. It originates from the brain. Explain. A brief cry escaped the third bundle. Some nerve cells are damaged. Some connections are not happening. How's that possible? Aren't these a few days old? From the first bundle, small feet pushed out of the blanket and kicked twice. They are 3 weeks and a day old, but yes, they are part of the latest batch. Will it heal? I'm afraid not. The inspector sighed. Disappointing. The bird engineers wait. The eyes of the second bundle searched randomly and independently, but it did not otherwise move. It seems you have little information about the deficiency. It is recent, but it is prevalent. Increasing, yes. This is the 4th anomaly in the last 3 batches. Then you do not know what is wrong. Bird engineers looked at each other. We could speculate, one offered. No, you cannot, and you will not speculate. If anyone asks, your answer is that you do not know. The inspector paused and took a step closer to the table, but never reached out. Understood? The 3 engineers nodded. We do not know, they said as one. Satisfied, the inspector turned and walked away from the table. Midway to the door, she paused but did not look back. Get rid of it, she said, and left. So it's a pretty dark scene, but it gives an idea about what the priorities of the corporation, in this settings are, right? They have an agenda, and they basically won't stop at anything to get there. At least some people, a lot of people in the society are probably pawns. But so the second passage I'm going to read is happens a little bit not too far in the story. It's when Artens actually meet up with one of his friend Marty, and this is when he's kind of he woke up that morning without being able to find his sister, and then he's thinking Marty might have some information about that. So they meet in the boardroom at their work. So here it goes. The boardroom door slid open, let Artens in, and slid closed. His team was monitoring the deployment. The next wave was already scheduled. Everything should be good. Artens' full attention was on Marty. What about Detel? He asked again. Sit, said Marty, bringing the 2 chairs close to each other. The boardroom was located between the large open room that was the team's office space and the main corridors of management offices. On both sides, the walls were made of glass. Marty put his chair with his back to the team's room, and Artens with his back to the management offices. As Artens sat down, Marty took a device out of a hidden pocket. He put it on his knee and pushed a button. Instantly, Artens heard a buzzing coming out of his B-pad. That's the chip. The small object was a scrambler. Sorry, boss, said Marty. It'd only be a minute. Suddenly, Artens had many questions, one of which was about the need for a scrambler. His B-pad was limited to the blue tower when in the building, so was Marty worried about someone internally? Did you talk to your sister today? Marty asked. It was the second time he had asked that question. No, I haven't. Why? What is going on? Did something happen to her? I don't know. Maybe. What do you mean, maybe? Marty, boss, listen. We don't have much time, said Marty, now crouched forward. Arten did the same, worried now, for his sister, but also for himself and Marty, maybe even for his team. His hands shook. The whole thing was crazy. He stole a glance toward the corridor behind him. In the middle of the hallway, he saw Dreyfus talking with a woman completely in white. If Dreyfus saw him, he would automatically storm this way, asking why he was not supervising the project. Artens. It was rare that Marty used his name. Artens whipped his head back to his friend. I'm listening, he said. Marty hesitated, swallowed, and then said, "Your sister is gone from the sphere." "I know," said Hortense, "this morning." No, completely. This stopped Hortense cold. Profile room is gone. Profile card is gone. All the information on her is completely gone. She's been flushed from the data sphere. This didn't make sense. Flushed. All the information gone from the data sphere? Marty was still talking, but Hortense was not listening. "You must be mistaken," cut in. Marty took a deep breath. This seemed painful for him. "I don't think so," he said. "I've been trying to find her for the past hour." This probably explained why there had been a glitch in wave 2. Marty has not been paying attention, or he would have caught it before it happened. That was what Marty did best, monitoring and catching issues before they became visible. Marty never said when he caught any problem, but more often than not, Hortense knew when it happened. "I've dug deep," said Marty, "probably too deep." "What do you mean?" asked Hortense, "too deep?" "I've gone to tier 0, said Marty. "What is tier 0? asked Hortense. "Is there a tier 0? "Forbidden," said Marty. "Information deleted over the years. History changed, possibly. There's an endless pit, of which I've only scratched the surface." "Are you certain?" Hortense was trying to wrap his head around what Marty was saying. Marty only looked at him. "Of course you are," said Hortense. The risks were now evident. It was one thing to navigate tier 7 and look up somebody's financial or medical history. It was something else entirely to dig into the state's or corporation's secrets. Change history, deleted facts. This was serious stuff. "Were you found?" asked Hortense. "Maybe," said Marty. "Why did you go that deep?" "For you, boss," said Marty. "I thought you would want me to be thorough." The words were spoken softly with affection. The severity of the situation was starting to sink in for Hortense, to take over his composure, slowly and painfully. "You believe that Telly's gone," he said. "I just can't find her," Marty replied. So that was that. The last part I wanted to read from is from the other main character, Kaidi. And basically, the city where the story takes place, they're building it up. Which is an idea I think I got from the movie The Fifth Element. There's a scene with New York where I think Bruce Willis' character flies in a flying taxi, and he kind of flies down, and the deeper it goes, the darker it gets. So the idea here in this city, which is permanent city, is that after X amount of years, when they notice that they kind of can't keep the city clean, they close some levels, and they just build a complete opaque floor, and then they live above that. So as a result, there's a bunch of floors that nobody lives in. That's called the underground. So as Kaidi starts running away, she kind of finds herself in those tunnels. And there's one other character, which is kind of a superhuman enforcer, a cyborg that's trying to catch her. And so the scene I'm about to read is when she realizes actually that the enforcer actually kind of caught up with her. "This isn't possible," thought Kaidi, numbed by the sight. How had he found her? Move, she told herself. But she couldn't. She felt defeated, utterly drained, nothing left. She wanted to cry. "It's not over," she tried to convince herself. "Not yet. Think about Hortense. Think about the baby." She could not quit. Not now. Not so close. Kaidi disappeared inside the building, made her way back to the elevator. Her eyes adjusted to the darkness, so she did not need her W pad to see. There was a faint and constant glow, even this deep under permanence. Kaidi did not know if it was the sun making its way down or something else completely. By the elevator, the darkness was deeper, almost complete. She felt along the wall, found the cable, and connected her B-pad once more to the circuit. No prompt. Had there been one the first time she connected? Kaidi could not remember. How did Marty think she would activate the elevator without a prompt? Kaidi looked back toward the building's large room. She had closed the door to the hallway, but saw a probing light under it, coming from the other side. Quickly, she browsed through the manual, did not find anything. Calm now, she told herself. Think. She returned to the B-pad in the circuit. She tried a simple information command, and to her surprise, the prompt appeared. The command was unknown, but at least she had found the prompt. Now she could experiment. With enough time, she could figure this out, but she didn't have time. Looking quickly over her shoulder, she saw the moving light under the door. Her fingers shook as she typed on the minivid. She tried a few commands without success, until finally she tried open doors, and the doors opened. And the elevator's two metal doors slid open, creaking loudly. As they hit the inside of their pockets, a sound reverberated all the way down the hallway, and there was no doubt that the enforcer had heard. Kaidi turned towards the elevator to find that the shaft was empty. She felt it more than she saw it. There should have been a cabin there to which to step, but there was nothing, only emptiness. Kaidi put her head over the edge and looked down and saw absolutely nothing. Behind, she heard heavy steps, armored feet on the ground. She turned on the light over her wrist pad and put her wrist over the opening, pointing down. Her heart sank. As she had expected, there was no sign of a cabin. Ahead, in the middle of the shaft, two large cables, too far to reach, except by jumping. She knew the elevator went down around 10 levels. A fall would certainly mean death. She looked back. The door at the end of the hallway opened, and the enforcer appeared. Kaidi turned off the light of her W pad. Without thinking now, she disconnected from the panel, put her equipment in her bag on one shoulder, and slid over the edge. Her feet tried to find a hole, but there was none. The enforcer made his way toward her. She was halfway down the shaft, her chest still on the floor, her legs dangling. The strobe light flashed across her face and blinded her momentarily. The enforcer's step stopped. Instantly, the beam of light came back and stopped on her face. Kaidi looked down, away from the powerful light. "There you are," echoed the voice, followed by quick steps. Kaidi did not know what to do. Should she let the enforcer take her and hope to escape later, or should she push herself from the ledge and try to grab the cables? At that moment, the motor of the elevator roared from above. The door slid closed and would squeeze her if Kaidi didn't move. The strobe light of the enforcer was aimed at her and provided light. She saw the cable vibrating. One of the doors hit her right shoulder. Kaidi turned back toward the inside of the building, and the enforcer, with his dark bubble of a head, was upon her. Extending a hand, he grabbed one of the doors and forced it open. The second door slid away as well, its mechanism bound to the opening door. "Let her go," suddenly came a voice from down the hallway. Kaidi's heart skipped a beat. Still, the enforcers never hesitated. Keeping the doors open with one hand, he unclipped the pistol from his leg with the other. The weapon automatically charged at his touch. Kaidi climbed up, grabbed the hand with the pistol. She would not let the enforcer shoot at steel again. The enforcer turned her away and let go of the pistol, grabbing her arm instead. The grip was painful, robotic in its strength. He pulled Kaidi up out of the elevator shaft. Kaidi made the decision then that she would not be caught. She looked into the helmet of darkness and saw eyes staring back at her. With her second hand, she grabbed the collar of his armor and pulled it toward her. At the same time, with both of her feet, she pushed herself from the ledge. Caught by surprise, the enforcer lost his balance. Together, they fell into the shaft. And that's it. That was the third of the reading. So yeah, and now I guess it's if you guys had any questions, put the slide on there. That's me in New Zealand with the arms in the air. So that's how I felt when I finished the book and published it, but that's how I felt when I was in New Zealand as well. I'm a big fan of New Zealand. We love the country over there. It's extremely beautiful.
That's all right. That last scene there that you read, it really has you wondering what's going to happen next. That's the way the book is most of the way through that I remember.
Yeah, that's the thriller part, right? That's what I tried to do, try to keep some suspense going. And interestingly enough, about that scene, the initial draft that I completed, usually I don't write the end of a book. I made it almost all the way to the end. But I try to make a complete pass as early as I can. that's what I can. That's one of the best, I guess, tip that I got is, you try to go from the beginning to the end as soon as you can with a story, and then you come and fix it. But in one of those initial, almost completed draft, what happened after that scene is you actually jumped in time, probably a few hours, and then you started reading the action, and you still didn't know what had happened, and you kind of learned it later on in that scene. And then when I sent it to a better reader, he came back and he said, no, you can't do that. You can't do that. He said, I want to know what happened when she fell down the shaft. You have to write that scene. And I was like, I don't want to write that scene. That's a very hard scene to write. I don't want to write that. And no, I was terrorized about writing that scene. And so it took me a while to get around to it, but I finally did it. I wrote the scene. I think it's the next chapter in that case. I don't not let the reader doesn't have to wait long. I think it starts right there. But I was really nervous about writing that scene because it's I don't know, it kind of pushed, I guess, my knowledge of what I knew, and but it was kind of it was a good challenge, and I've heard it came out pretty good, so I'm happy with it. It's definitely better with it. I can admit as much. It was kind of a cheap of me to try to jump over that, and the other thing that the same beta reader told me was in those undergrounds, there's things happening in there, and I don't know if you remember that, Jane. There's like something stirring down there, right? And in the first draft, again, I only hinted at what that was, and the same beta reader, and he came back and said, no. He said, you need to give me a little bit more than that. So he said, you don't have to tell me everything. It can remain a mystery, but you have to show a little bit more. So so I did add a few scenes for that as well. I think most readers like it, but I did get a few feedback of people that would like to know more. They would still like to know more about what's happening down there. But it's kind of, I would have to go out of my way to provide that information because the main characters really just have a very small interaction, with that entity. So
It sounds like another book to me.
I don't know. This was supposed to be a standalone book. I have a lot of projects in fantasy. I have this crazy series that I'm starting now, which is the follow-up to Burden. So if you look at my right here, so Burden is kind of a prequel to a series, and that series is 10 books. And I just finished the first one, and that scares me to death as well because it's so huge. And that's the one that gave me a hard time. That book was crazy. It took me, I think I started in 2003. I started writing in French. It was 15,000 words. It's now 120,000 words in English. It was hell, but I think it's pretty good. I'm very happy with it. Finally, the last revision that I did, I'm very happy with it. But I had a lot of nervousness because it's the first in the series, and I wanted to make sure that I was sending myself in the good direction. So the plan was to concentrate on that, and I have a few other series. So I never planned really to write a sequel, but a lot of people told me that they'd like one. So I had kind of a story that I had started that I was kind of putting on hold, but now I can kind of revived it a little bit. So I might be writing on the sequel sooner than I had expected. It's still going to be a few years because I'm working on a bunch of other stories, but it's a fun world. There's a lot of cool characters, and the Autumn Pat, the anthology that just came out, my short story in there is titled Red Stars, and it takes place 6 years before Deficiency, but it's one of the characters from Deficiency that's in there. So it does provide a little bit of background of that on that character. So, but there's a lot of directions I could go. Obviously, I mean that underground is an interesting one. I'm not sure yet how much of that I'm going to explore in the next book, but it's going to be fun.
I guess one of my questions is, where do you find the time to write? You have a full-time job, you have a new baby, I think, and you've got a family.
I
Goodness.
do. I don't have the question to that, the answer to that. No, a lot of the stories that, like my 3 books that were published, including this one, have you seen? This one took me 10 years. So a lot of it was written before I had kids. Actually, my oldest is 4. So most of my stories were written before that, and but it's a small piece at a time. That's the thing that I'm trying to do, is write consistently. That's one of the best advice I guess I can give to writers, and that's what I've been trying to. It's been a struggle. I want to hide. It's been a struggle. With the full-time job, the kids. You have kind of different seasons in your life, right? And some seasons are kind of better for writing, and other seasons are not as good for writing. And in my 2 first kids, I had to put writing on hold. But with this one, so far, my youngest now is 2 months old. I've been very productive. I've kind of found a way to just write. I write during the night when I feed her. Obviously, when she kind of snuggle down and kind of fall asleep, but I don't want to put her on her back yet because she just ate. So usually I give her 30-40 minutes to kind of settle before I lay her down. So I take that 30-40 minutes and I'm writing, and I do very well with writing at night or very early in the morning. To me, that's when I can shut the world out, when it's dark and I'm in kind of a bubble, put a soundtrack on. I do very well. But yeah, that's the thing. I've been lucky because I've written a lot of stories earlier on before I had kids. I would write in the morning back then, mostly before I go to work. That works. That's my best time. But I've tried anything, really. I've written at night sometimes. Sometimes I have a picture there, not in this presentation, but I remember I posted on Instagram where my laptop is on the kitchen counter because I was just writing in the kitchen between feeding the kids, and trying to just put some words in. So, but I'm looking forward to retirement so that I can write more, and not have it be such a challenge, right? So yeah, so that's it's not easy. It's a question of priorities, I guess. So I try to prioritize writing. I had to let go of other things, video games and a little bit of reading as well. I read a little bit less. Reading is a tough one because you want to read a lot because it helps so much for writing. But with so little time, you kind of have to play with that. But yeah.
Well, thank you so very much, Steve. This has been an excellent evening and an excellent presentation. And I'm just going to switch to the next slide so that we can see where you can get your books.
Sure. So you can visit me on my website, or you can contact me directly. Especially if you want signed copies, then you can definitely contact me directly. I'll ship them out, or I'll deliver them personally if you're in New Brunswick, in most places in New Brunswick.
I've got to ask one more question before you go.
Sure.
And that is, it's been a year since I read the book, but I remember that a lot of the extra things that you put in, like the map and some character sketches and different things like that, they're perfect for science fiction. And one of the things you did was you had a different approach to the time and date. And I think you started, using the time and date right through.
Yeah.
And just a little bit of your thinking on that. I found that intriguing. And I think anybody who read your book would find that really interesting.
Yeah, no, I found this author several years ago, China Mieville. And I just admire him so much. And he would do things that I never saw anywhere. In one of his books, it's called, what is it? Railway or something, I think. it's about a world where basically you can't step on the ground, and there's railroads everywhere, and you have to take a train. But if you step off the train, there's creatures in the ground that just gonna basically attack you right away. And one of the things he did in that book was that instead of writing and A and D, he would use the %. And when I started reading it, I was like, oh man, that's so annoying. Like you just, because it's just so big, you know, in the text, and it kind of pulls your eyes to it. And I'm like, but after a while, I was like, that's kind of cool, you know, like it's like the shape of it kind of reminds you of a railroad, right? And it's, anyway, it was very interesting. And I like things like that, you know. I like authors that kind of do small things like that. And sometimes authors probably do some and I kind of miss them, but you know, I kind of try to kind of do different things when I write, right? In this one, the dates is one, right? The date format, the year format is, you have the millennium, then a dot, then a number for the century, I guess, then K, you know, because it's for the kilo, right? The prefix, or the to say 1,000. Then you have the year. So you would have like 3.4K34, you know, which was the year, you know, 3,434. And one of the reasons I kind of like that is because, you know, when you're in the computer world as well, you use like kilobytes, you know, right? You talk about kilobyte, megabyte and stuff. So the K to me was like, oh yeah, that's kind of a nudge to kind of the informatic world, right? And I don't remember how I came up with that, to be honest. I'm just thinking like, that's probably gonna annoy some readers. But I thought it'd be a cool way to just kind of, instead of just the year, you know, just kind of add a little something to it. Another thing I did with this book is the chapters, which again might annoy some people, but you know, you'll start with a dot, and then the chapter 2 will have 2 dots, the third one will have 3 dots, and then 4 dots, and then suddenly it becomes, I think, the vertical line, something. And then it's kind of these weird symbols as you go through the book. And I will use that on my short story that I wrote before this one, which was called Logbox. By the way, all my short stories in this setting, in the setting of Garadia, that's the galaxy and the planet, they're all related. They're all linked between them. If you read all of them, you'll see links between the characters and the setting and where it happens. So Logbox was my first story. This one is the second one. And I had used those dots in Logbox. And then I used it with this one, but I had no idea why I was doing that. With Logbox, I had no idea. So this one, I kind of figured a way. I was like, okay, this is cool, but what if it was related to the story? And I don't know if you remember, Jane, but by the end of the story, you learn what those symbols are. You learn that Artens and Marty, which are the 2 friends that we've seen in the scene, they had this kind of encryption language that they put together, right? That has a base 5, and that's what those symbols are. You know, the dots is 1 1 1 1, and then the vertical line is your 5, and then that's how you kind of figure out what the number is. Not gonna lie, when writing, that was kind of annoying, because I would kind of start with writing on the chapter and was like, what's this number? Like I couldn't read it right away. I had to calculate it every time, right? So at one point I was like, maybe I should just write the numbers while I'm writing, and then I'll put the symbols later. But finally I just left the symbols. But yeah, I guess that's just the reason I wanted to make a difference too. I'm trying to be very careful about my settings, because I have 4 or 5, I think, settings now that I write, and I really want to make them different one from the other. This is the easiest to make different because it's my only science fiction setting. Mm-hmm. I have another one that's kind of hybrid science fiction / weird kind of fiction, but yeah, I'm trying to find ways to make them different so that when I sit down and I write, it's kind of easier to kind of get into the story as well. And it doesn't maybe seem that way, but you know, that 3.4K thing, when I see that, it kind of puts me in the mindset of that setting, right? So it's a bit of that as well. Or maybe that comes later. Maybe I try something, then I'm like, okay, readers will find this annoying, so I better find a good reason why I want to keep it, right? So, and then I come up with these excuses or explanation that why I'm keeping them. But
I think your sci-fi readers will get it right away and love it.
Thanks.
Okay, we're going to wrap up the meeting now, and I want to thank you so much for attending, and thank you, Steve, for doing a great presentation. And just to let our viewers know that we will be posting this on the LP Fisher Library Facebook page next week. So if anybody wants to watch it again, or we had one person that had some audio problems, and they'll be able to watch that too. So
Perfect.
thank you so much.
Well, thank you for having me.